Welcome to Bite Size PL, professional learning you can consume during lunch or on a dog walk or while you plant your garden. Our goal is to provide meaningful, engaging, and brief conversations for educators. I'm Jared, and my co-host today is Jenette.
Hi, Jared.
Hey, and we have a special guest with us, Jennifer Burt, who is a math magician and a recent Best of Davis winner, and she's at Syracuse Junior High. Jennifer, one of the things about your background that I think would be good for everyone to know is you have a unique perspective of having taught at both the elementary and the secondary level. And I just want you to begin with, how has your background in elementary influenced your approach in a secondary setting?
That is a great question, Jared. I have taught elementary, and I did upper elementary, so 5th and 6th grade. And I have just transitioned this year over to 7th grade. It has helped a ton. I have taken a lot of the classroom models and classroom management that I learned in elementary and brought that with me into secondary, like small groups and a few other things that are used all the time in elementary, but seem to, for some reason, disappear as we move into secondary. I know that because of that, I am able to meet with more kids, and I've had a lot of teachers who've approached me and said, how are you doing that? And I didn't realize that those skills I had learned in elementary were things that were a little more foreign in secondary.
Yeah, I think in elementary and secondary, we kind of feel like it's a different skill set for teaching, and so we get kind of siloed. So it's always fun for me to talk to one of our very few secondary teachers who spent some years in the elementary classrooms. So what are, after a year now in secondary, what are some of the things that you think elementary teachers might be able to learn from secondary teachers? And do you have any more specific ideas for things that elementary teachers do that secondary teachers could learn more from them?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like that one thing elementary teachers could learn from secondary teachers is that secondary teachers definitely are experts in their content, right? And I know going through college, those that I worked with that were doing secondary, they spent so much more focus on that content. I was fortunate enough in the elementary I was at where we did rotations, and I was still able to focus just on the mathematical content for those classes. I know that that's not the case in all elementary schools. And I do know when you're teaching all subjects, it is a little more difficult to become specific content experts in certain fields. Some teachers have things they like better than others. And so I feel like that's one thing is I've been surrounded by people who are really experts in what they do. And I've really enjoyed that. And I've learned from a lot of them in that aspect. As far as other things that I've learned from elementary is I didn't realize that in secondary, there is not as much emphasis on classroom management as there is in elementary. And so I've had a lot of teachers that I've realized who've talked to me about how, well, I struggle to get kids to do this, and I struggle to get students to comply with this or to participate in this. And in elementary, that's what your main focus really is. Your main focus is on getting those kids to work together, to come sit down at the rugs where they need to do this, to do that, and to have a lot of pieces moving at the same time. In secondary, I've seen a lot of teachers that struggle with getting multiple things going at the same time. And that's where I think this traditional method of teaching where everyone's sitting at their desks and listening to a teacher speak, and then everyone's doing a worksheet or everyone's doing an activity, because it does take classroom management to be able to get kids doing multiple different things at different times.
Yes, which is what it looks like in your classroom.
Well, and I think that really leads into one of the practices that we saw in your class was the menu. And I think this would be a good time for you to explain how the menu works and then really kind of hit like how this might be contrary to what someone might think about this practice really empowering and motivating students.
Yeah, definitely. Menu has been something that has kind of taken shape over the year and took shape over the summer as I attended some classes for some math professional development. What menu is there's a time of our class. It's usually about 30-ish minutes or so where we've gone away from our task we're doing. We've moved past our note taking or what other teachers would call the direct instruction, which in my class is still more student led. But menu is where they get to practice their skills. So when we move to menu, do, I have little table tasks that the kids, they pass them out themselves all along the tables. Students are able to move wherever they would like that would be the best place for them to learn. They are also able to work independently. They're able to work with a partner. They're able to work with a small group that would fit on a table. And all of my tasks are also color-coded, which go and coincide with the standards-based grading we use at the school I'm at. So students are allowed to go and work on different level tasks based off of where they feel they are in their learning. I know that is contrary to what a lot of people do believe or do think needs to be done with students. And I have teachers all the time who say, well, do you ever find that kids just work on the easy ones? Or do you ever find kids that just do one or two problems and say, oh, well, that's all I need to do, and they don't complete? Because there's never a completion in menu. You never are given like, oh, you have to do 20 or you have to have this page done. There's no completion or minimal or maximum amount of work that can be done. And I've said to them, actually, I've seen the contrary, is that my students know that the higher level tasks are where my quizzes are from. And they've learned through trial and error that if they simply focus on the simple tasks, they will not be prepared for what the quiz is going to present them with. And then they have the consequences of receiving a lower grade, which in my class, the students are allowed to retake quizzes and do makeup and things like that. But it has actually taught them to be able to be more self-advocates in their own learning. It has taught them to be able to ask themselves, what is it I need? I have had students who were students that always sat with a group and would spend a lot of time talking, and then have come to me afterwards and said, Mrs. Burt, I've really found that I struggle to focus when I'm working with so-and-so or in this group, and I've needed to go and do stuff by myself. And I've had to tell them, you know what? That's the same with me. I'm a talker and I like to chat, and if I don't pull myself away, I'm aware of that. But as a 7th grader, realizing that that's what she needs to be able to learn her best, I think is huge. And I don't want them to be waiting until college or the end of their high school for them to have to realize that. To me, I look at 7th grade as that year where they can be trying a lot of different things to find out what works best for them. And Menu, in my opinion, allows students to be able to do that.
And I think that your reassurance to your colleagues and now to our audience, your reassurance that they're not defaulting down to the easiest thing, that probably makes people feel more willing to try the menu, and to know that somehow your students are motivated both extrinsically and intrinsically to try to push themselves so that they can do well on the quizzes and tests. So that's great, because that is always a concern that they'll just kind of default down to the lowest.
Yeah, and when I would talk to students during this time, and I would ask them like, well, why did you choose this particular task instead of some of these other ones? And because they're at this self-directed part and they're really monitoring their learning, they were saying things like, well, I feel like I needed more practice in this area, and I want to get to that higher level, but I'm just not quite ready for that. And I just thought, wow, that was really profound that these students know where they're at in their learning, which is that whole self-directed piece. So one thing I wanted to point out as well that you can talk to is, while the students are working, in this menu time, you're meeting with students as well. And so why don't you explain how that works?
What I'm doing is, so the students, it's very self-led, all of Menu. I usually get up and make a couple laps around the room during that time just to check on everybody and ask questions and check in. But for the majority of the time, I'm actually sitting at a horseshoe table, which is a very elementary. We see them all the time. And most of my secondary teachers look at me and are like, what is that? And what are you using that for? I can sit about 6 kids or so around the table with me. And I am pulling students that are needing a little extra help. The reason I chose these students was for a few options. One, I know that there's someone who's needing some extra help because of what I've seen with their work, and so I pull them over. How do you feel after you sat with me? Are you feeling like you've got some better understanding? Okay. The second reason, which I actually am trying as the years progress to push more and more students in this direction, is at the end of menu, my students not only take a picture of what their work, but they also fill out a online survey. They take a few minutes to answer a couple questions, and one of those questions is, after today's menu work, how do I feel about the content? And there's 4 choices they can choose: that I feel great and could take the quiz tomorrow. Another choice is, I feel really confident but could use a little more practice. Another option is, I am struggling and could use a little help. And then the final option is, I feel really lost and would love to spend some time working with you. And they select that. And then I, at the end of the day, shoot out an Excel spreadsheet to myself that then I use the next day they come in, and I pull directly from that. So any kids that are feeling they need some one-on-one are able to vocalize that to me in this form. And then I pull them over and we work, we dig in, I give them problems. We try to do a little bit more tasks that the group's working together, but I'm spending most of that time at that table with those students.
Yeah, it's pretty fun to watch how busy it is in your classroom, and busy doing a variety. People are doing a variety of things, but there's not a lot of wasted time. There's not a lot of people just sitting around, no heads down, things like that.
Well, and I just love that, they have these choices to not only go where they want to go in menu, but then you have this intentional closure at the end of the day where they kind of get to say, this is where I'm at right now. And you're also checking for understanding as well. So, really you're hitting at these high levels of, like, you know where the students are and they know where they are as well, which is, that whole powerful thing with focusing on the learning.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I remember this quote from. It could have even been from the Building Thinking Classrooms book. I'm not sure, but it was said, and I've heard it several times, that the highest indicator of where your students are at in their learning is if you ask the students. And so to me, I find that when my kids fill out and say, I'm ready for the quiz, when I give them the quiz, those kids are doing great on the quiz. If I get a student that says to me, I'm not understanding, and I give them a quiz, I can see on their quiz they're not understanding. So I feel like their input is just as important as what I feel their learning is at. I want to know what they're thinking about the situation.
I think one thing that helps with that process, and this is a thing for teachers to be thinking about, are we being clear with the students what the learning goal is? Because sometimes we ask students, did you understand that? Do you have any questions about today's learning? And they're not even quite clear on what the learning was supposed to be. So I think that clarity really helps as well. All right. Well, when we ask teachers what they need, what they almost always answer is more time. So I know that the way you've structured your classroom this year has given you some good insights about teachers and use of time. So what can you share in that direction?
Yeah, actually, this whole model that I have kind of created from pulling bits and pieces of other models actually came to me in more of a selfish factor, because again, this is my third year teaching. And I knew that if this was going to be a long-term career for me, I needed to do things to be making this a sustainable career. And I would listen to colleagues who would spend hours over the weekend grading activities or projects or worksheets or homework, spending hours after school. I was at the elementary where there would be people who I would drive past the parking lot still at 6:00 at night, and they'd be sitting, I knew their car was out there. And I knew for me that was not something that was going to have me going 30 years. I wasn't going to be able to
Yes.
do that. And so I really tried over the summer and the last year or so to really kind of hone in on, like, what is giving me the largest output from my students with the least amount of input from me. And I really feel like that menu and doing the tasks has given me so much more time. I am never here before or after contract hours. I never am spending weekend time or holiday. My spring break, I went and enjoyed myself and didn't give one single thought to school, because I knew that I was ready for Monday, Tuesday when I came back, and I had my tasks ready and I had the items ready for students to go and do. And so it has really just freed up a lot of time in my job, as well as mental time that I'm devoting to being worried and stressed about being prepared for what my students need.
That's amazing. And we asked Peter Liljedahl about different content areas, and he said, the book is out there. He's going to get it written. But any way that we can just take these concepts that you're sharing and transfer them into our own content areas. Even if we can't take the whole method, but pieces of it, I feel like teachers will get that same excitement of this is saving me time, which I think is huge.
For sure. Yeah. And it's also, I feel like, saving me time that I know a lot of teachers are concerned of, like, I only have this full year and I have to get through all this curriculum. But one of the things that I learned from Peter was with the tasks that I use, we're actually covering multiple days of lessons. When I look at other colleagues who are doing, well, day to day, we do this, we do this, we do this. I'm covering those in a lot smaller amount of time, which allows us to really dig deeper into those ideas and those standards instead of feeling like I have a timeline and at the end I'm crunching to shove everything that I couldn't get in throughout the year.
Well, two of the most sought after skills that any profession is desiring of their employees is to be able to clearly communicate and work well together. And you provide a lot of opportunities each and every day for students to communicate and collaborate with one another. What are some of the benefits that have come from this focus?
Yeah, for sure. When my students come in, they are put in random groups every day. And so they have to work with new people at their tables. And then within the first 5 to 10 minutes of class, we are up at the boards on whiteboards that I have surrounded in my room. And we're working on tasks. And they don't get to choose who they're with. Those groups change up every day. They're not put in any sort of order. I don't mix highs and lows together or lows all together. It's just very random. And my students have to learn to work together and to talk together. It was definitely a path that we took at the beginning of the year. I look back now and can't believe the conversations that I hear going on in my room comparative to what we were just, 8 months ago, not even 9, because it's not, it's the middle of April right now. And my colleague that actually works with me and him are the two that teach 7th grade, was just in my room earlier today. And he's been trying to incorporate some of these things in his practice as well. And he said to me that next year, he said, I am all in. Like, you and I are going to do this together. And he said, because as I've been trying to include more things like this, I'm realizing that my students are very spoon-fed. And he said, I've come in your room and listened to your students talk. And there is a huge difference between the talking, the idea sharing, the collaboration that goes on with your students versus my students. And he said, and I don't think that's because your students are more capable than mine. It's just because that's what my class has not been set up for that. And I need that from my students. I've seen a huge benefit of that. And it has just been amazing to sit and listen the ideas, the problem solving, and for all the kids to be on board. I've told all my students that every one of them has a role in that group. And even if your role is just saying, you know what, I don't understand this. I need someone to explain it to me differently or in a different way. Everybody has a role.
I was surprised when we were talking to students and they said one of the benefits of being in class was that their social skills improved. And it's from talking with one another. And they were able to clearly connect that to what was going on in the class, but also just hey, I can talk to anybody now. I felt that I was pretty shy before, but because we're with somebody different every day, that's just improved my skills.
Yeah, I've had a lot of parents actually reach out to me through emails and just parent-teacher conferences and have said the same thing, that their students were a lot more quiet, or maybe they were ones who didn't offer up suggestions in class, and that they have seen such a difference in their students, and that their students love coming to math, which for anyone who teaches math, that's always a success, because that definitely seems to be the class that a lot of kids go, oh, math. And so just from the community, I've just had a lot of outpouring from parents saying how much their students have really enjoyed it, and the social aspect that they've gotten to know more kids, that we really feel like our classroom is a community.
Oh, thank you for sharing some of those innovations this year and the effect they've had in your classroom. So what's next? What do you have your eye on for next year, goals for your classroom that might be interesting to mention?
Yeah, I'm so happy that you asked me about that. I've got a couple things. One of the things that I'm going to be thinking about, and I've got a few ideas going in my brain, is I even want to get my class to be even more student-led. And I've been thinking about, when I take attendance, I just go through each of the class tables and I say table 1, table 2, or 3, and the kids tell me who's missing. Well, I've thought next year I would love to push that task off onto some students that are doing some more things like that. I typically am the one who administers the task orally to my students every day. And I would love to get some student input and have a student maybe that loves soccer, and we come up with a task and they can actually share the task to everyone and maybe put in some personal bits where it applied to them. So I'm really looking at taking that student led that I'm trying to set up in my room and even move forward with that more so that I can get some kids maybe taking a little more of leadership in our classroom. And so that's kind of where my brain is. I'm also really thinking, I've been working with someone from learning, a curriculum and learning department, that I'm wanting to start doing a little more journaling with my students. I've been thinking about either writing or even flip grids so that they could record themselves. I'm wanting to do more data tracking on how their thinking has evolved. Not so much their math skill, but what their thinking has evolved from. Because I look back now and would have loved to look back at students and see where their thinking was in September versus where their thinking is. So a little more metacognition, where the students are thinking about what they're thinking about. So those are kind of the two areas that I've got some things in my head that I'm thinking about for next year and would like to move forward.
Well, those are fantastic ideas. I'll be interested to see how that looks like when you're able to implement that. So in closing, we like to end with a gift, something that you're enjoying and you want to share with our audience. So do you have a gift for us?
I do, actually. So I don't know if you're familiar with this person. His name's Joshua Becker. He is an author, and he writes a lot of books. The one that I just recently read, I believe, was Simply Minimalist. And he just is very into minimalism. And he's not into minimalism like, you can have 2 items that you own type minimalism. But he's very much into trying to minimalize his life and teach others so that we don't have as much on our plates and on our shoulders. And I have been for years kind of a self-proclaimed minimalist, and I feel like that's where a lot of these ideas from my education has come, is I'm wanting to minimize things that are not really there, that are supporting much growth. There's a lot of things in education I feel like that's fluff. And if that's your thing and you love that, then great. But if it's adding more on your plate, then is it really producing an outcome? And if it's not producing an outcome that we want, then I might as well get rid of it. So,
well, thanks so much for sharing. We'll have to check that out. As we wrap up, we just want to thank our producer Tom for making this sound so good. This season, we're also putting the video of the podcast on YouTube, and you can continue listening on your favorite podcast app, and also check out the video on the YouTube channel. Check the show notes for that link. Thanks for joining us. Please like and subscribe and share the podcast with others. See you at school.